for the rest of your team. This ramp is going to take at least 4 buildings to block off in most cases, and the rush distance is probably the shortest, except for maybe toxic slums, which we'll get into in a little bit. Counterattack strategies, drops are pretty strong on this map. You're almost always going to find that 2 players are fighting on one side while the other 2 players are fighting on the other side. So, coordinating your attacks so that when one team hits, the other team's withdrawing, and vice versa, is going to be very effective on this map. Lings, early pull strategies are really, really strong on this map. In general, the team with the most Zergs tends to win. So, unless if your team is entirely made of non-Zergs and you're going against 2 or more Zergs, and your team actually blocks off effectively, you're probably going to have some problems on this map, just because early in the game, Ling run-bys are a real issue. Banelings are a real problem because they can easily morph it behind these bushes. Chances are you probably won't see it coming, and then they'll bust into your base, and then, of course, it's pretty much game over at that point. Meterless are also really strong on this map because you have this huge ridge along here where there's no way to chase them back once they get beyond this point. There's also a lot of kind of areas along the edge of the map and ridges and everything else that they can fly out on and avoid being hit. Roach timing pushes can also be pretty strong just because the rush distance is pretty short, but in general I would say stick with Lings on this map unless if you're encountering a lot of Hellions. As far as Terran players go, I'd say Ling Hellion strategies are super strong on this map because oftentimes if Terran players don't get a bunker or if Protoss players don't have a cannon, you're easily going to be able to break down that wall and bust in the other enemy's base. I'd say Bio is also pretty good on this map, especially because you can do drops along here. Even though there's Zelnaga towers overlooking, it's pretty hard to defend drops because if you're out here and camping most of the time, which most teams will, to try and defend these expansions off to the side, it's going to be a bit of an issue trying to navigate between there and back into your main base and so on and so forth. So Hellions, really strong on this map. Tanks, also extremely strong on this map. You can often cut the map in half just by using tanks and start leapfrogging your way over to the enemy's base. So those are probably 2 great strategies I would stick with as Terran. Either mobile units with lots of counterattacks doing drops, or else I would do, some kind of tank push with a 1-1-1 build. Protoss players, Blink, it's okay on this map, not that great because most of the time, once you blink in the enemy's base, there's not really much of a way out, except to go all the way around the edge here, which is not the most effective use of your time. So Colossus are much stronger on this map because there's chokes everywhere. Most of the places you can be blocked off with just 2 force fields, including some of these open areas right here. Really, 2 force fields is going to make it so that only 1 or 2 units can trickle through at a time. And Colossus are also strong against enemies who have to get an early cannon or an early bunker or something like that, trying to defend against Ling run-bys and whatnot. So oftentimes when I do Protoss strategies on this map, I'll open with a 3 gate. Potentially expand and then adding Colossus a little bit later in the game. Warp Prism is also pretty good, so that's why Robotech is probably the best strategy on this map. Stargates are also pretty good, but it's not the best against Terrans because stimmed Marines easily catch up to most Protoss units, and Phoenixes aren't going to do a whole lot against turrets anyways. So in general, stick with Robotech if you're going Protoss on this map. So just remember, guys, that this is mostly a counterattack map where you're going to have 2 people split off on either side of the map. And then basically units that can take advantage of narrow chokes are obviously the best units on this map. Okay, next map. Welcome to Quarry. This is the next map in the map pool. This map features pretty large ramps, fairly long rush distances, and also these back bases make it much harder to block this front ramp off. And in general, any team that has at least 1 Zerg is not really going to be able to block this off early in the game. So Ling run-bys, Hellions getting in the enemy base is going to be a real issue for teams that are stuck defending. So in general, unless if your team has at least 2 Zergs, I would probably down this map, just because it just favors mobile units such as Lings, Hellions, and all those other lovely things like blink stalkers. Um, Favorable strategies for Zergs, I'd say you'll want to go like Roach Infester kind of later in the game because you need something mobile. And mutas, even though they are technically more mobile than roaches, the only problem is until you get out to the mid part of the map, you really have no way to escape stemmed marines or blink stalkers or any other kind of units that are chasing you down. And there's not a lot of dead space behind the bases, so oftentimes if you do get stuck back here, somehow you end up getting zoned inside, and then they'll end up cornering a whole bunch of your mutas, and then you'll lose all of them. So stick with infestors for the most part on this map, unless of course they're completely unprepared for mutas, and then by all means go for it. Terrans, you're going to want to stick with a mobile army on this map. Terran armies with tanks aren't really that great unless if you're going to try and siege up the front line. For instance, if there's Terrans on the other team and they're trying to siege your front line, if you have production buildings here, that can be a bit of an issue. Because the ramp, any kind of ramp, makes it hard to attack into siege tanks because everything gets a little bit clumped up. But unless of course your team is going for a timing push, I would try and stay away from tanks for the most part on this map, just because with all this wide open space here, if you do go tanks, chances are you're going to get counterattacked, and it's going to take so long for your tanks to get back and get into position. And also, most of the time, you're not even going to be able to make it to the enemy's ramp before you get engaged. So tanks out in the open, in this open space here, can easily get surrounded by more mobile units. So gateway bio armies, and then lings and roaches do really well against tanks out in the open. Same can be said for Colossus on this map. There's not a lot of choked off areas for Colossus to be effective. So in general, try and stick with Templar tech on this map. So Blink Stalkers, Charge Lots, and Archons are really your best choice on this map. Unless, of course, you're against a team of entirely Protoss players, in which case Colossus are almost always the better choice. Let's see what else we got here. Alright, well, expansions. I'd say the expansions are definitely favorable for Zerg because there's a lot of wide open space once you get out past the expansions. So once you get creep spread, it's pretty easy to defend expansions as Zerg. However, if you're a Terran player or a Protoss player, it's going to be really difficult to defend expansions unless you have a couple cannons or a bunker or two or a planetary fortress, all which are big investments. So you're not going to be expanding a ton early in the game unless if you're Zerg on this map and your team has more Zergs. In general, this map is going to favor timing pushes with one team essentially pushing out in one big group, because there's only one real area in which teams are going to be attacking through in the beginning of the game. Even though there's destructible rocks over here, chances are you're not going to be able to destroy them till later in the game. And if you honestly had the time to take these out early in the game, you should have been spending that time attacking your opponent and putting on a little bit of pressure. Drop strategies not all that great on this map, just because the Xel'Naga towers and oftentimes the expansions over here are going to spot any incoming drops before they ever get there. And Blink Stalkers are pretty strong on this map because of these ridges along here, which if you have an Observer or an Overlord or something like that, you can basically blink right from one side into the other and harass your enemy's expansions. So I think that'll cover it for this map then, guys. And then the next one we'll move on to... Okay. Well, this is the next map in the map pool. This is Lava Flow. One of the older maps that was originally came out basically in the very first patch when there was a public release for the StarCraft 2. This map is very difficult to defend on, especially because of the large ramps and the separated bases. Teams with lots of Zergs are going to have an advantage on this map, especially if they have even one Protoss and 3 Zergs or 2 Zergs, because Protosses can just cannon rush here, and this Overlord only takes basically a minute to get to that point. And then you can easily start cannon rushing this player here. And if he doesn't go Forge first himself, he's not going to have defense in time to be able to defend against a cannon rush. Even if there's only cannons on the low ground, a cannon placed right here can hit every single mineral patch in this base. So you have to really be aware of cannon rushes on this map. But in general, if you don't have at least